So in September, we'll be coming round to celebrating 10 years. Yes, 10 years of AM by Arctic Monkeys. And boy, I can't believe this album has been out for a decade now, making me realise the inevitable passage of time, and I'm starting to get on a bit. But in the run-up to celebrating 10 great years of this album, I thought we'd take a look at AM and the ways in which opinions have changed on the album throughout the years. So, from the roaring opening of Do I Wanna Know to the echoing haunting vocals of I Wanna Be Yours, allow us to reminisce about this album and its longevity alongside addressing some of the criticisms that AM has amassed in its decade-long cycle. Now, taking it back to the point when this album was released, I was simply incredibly hyped for this album after not being into Humbug too much but enjoying Suck It and See. And being from Yorkshire, I grew up on Arctic Monkeys music, always creating a buzz as the best new thing and defending the band as one of our own. So although AM wasn't the album that got me into the band, it was their debut album which did. What I loved about AM's initial release is that a band I grew up with and took for granted over the years flew in and released an album to absolutely blast me away in the same way when I heard their original stuff, which gave me a new appreciation and respect for the band as musicians, reigniting that fire for a lot of Arctic Monkeys fans at the time, alongside launching their bid for worldwide fame and dominance, and ultimately securing their status as one of the true big rock bands of our time, and likely the best rock band of their generation. I think the interesting thing when taking a look at the Tracklist is once again the longevity in a lot of these songs from a commercial aspect, especially with regards to Do I Wanna Know. I mean, that roaring guitar riff gets used absolutely everywhere and anywhere as possible. I recently saw a video of Tom Brady announcing that he was going into co-ownership of Birmingham City Football Club, and all you could hear over the background of the video was It's also quite interesting just how many of these are consistently played at Arctic Monkeys gigs as regular setlist holders. And from seeing them live in my personal experience, they always get the biggest crowd reaction besides maybe I Bet You Look Good on the Dance Floor, which in fairness is Arctic Monkeys' Wonderwall. Alongside this, it seems that even after trying to shake it up, Are You Mine has returned and solidified itself as their main closer of all their shows. And undoubtedly is their best hype song they have, that is short but jagged, to the point and well written. The track list of the album also has a great circular storyline, going through asking, do you want to know the true feelings of another person, and ending up in complete open bearing all feelings to show, declaring I want to be yours, with the helping of John Cooper Clarke, obviously. The album also manages to hold a strong tone of clean-cut, serious, slick rock, despite varying from some humorous songs such as Why'd You Only Call Me When You're High, to more serious songs such as Number One Party Anthem and Mad Sounds. And Mad Sounds always reminds me of Alabama Shakes. Overall, though, the album provides a deceptively varied track list contrary to a lot of people who declare all the songs sound the same on the album. Now just venturing into the criticisms of the album a bit. As just mentioned, with some people declaring that all the album sounds the same. This is a repeated criticism of almost every single Arctic Monkeys album that tends to be spouted by people who declare Humbug as their favourite album, and is one I tend to not give too much weight to. I think the album does have a very clear tone throughout that it sticks to, on both its themes, its general instruments and vocal performance, but the variance is there on the album, and the same goes for their debut album and favourite Worst Nightmare, but maybe not Suck It and See. I think also a lot of the criticisms for the album come from AM capitulating the band into worldwide stature, building once more on the initial way they captured Britain with their debut. But alongside success also comes more eyes on your work. And the more eyes on your work, naturally there will be more people who just don't like it, or criticise it simply through not connecting with the work, which is all completely fair enough. There are some people who also deem the album to be somewhat soulless and without that initial spark from their first two albums. But in plenty of interviews, the band has stated the record was created to feel more refined and clean cut, without any background noise, in an attempt to not sound like just four guys in a studio anymore, and an aim to tie off their garage rock era. Personally, I think the slick, clean tones of the album, with everything being placed exactly where it's meant to be, both from an instrumental and a vocal point of view, works incredibly well, and is what ultimately gave this album its commercial success and favourable success with a lot of fans, as previously noted. However, I understand that if you're looking for pure carnage from their early albums, or some experimental variants from Humbug, you aren't going to get it on AM, as it wasn't written to be in that way at all. Overall, for me, AM reflected that Arctic Monkeys' initial success from their debut and follow-up wasn't just luck, and they weren't simply a sign of the times, or the next hottest trend only to be dropped after a few years. The band experimented a bit with Humbug, went breezy rock on Suck It and See, and then proceeded to remind us all exactly of who they were on AM, dropping one of the biggest and best rock records of the past 25 years, reflecting their talent and capability to repeat their overwhelming success. And I believe the longevity of AM as an album continues to highlight that as such. I understand why some Arctic Monkeys fans have become a bit disengaged with the band from their past two albums, but I think that's just because the band set the bar so incredibly incredibly high for themselves. It's rare that a band drops one of the greatest debut albums of all time, matches the hype with their second album, then only follows up 7 years later to recapture the hearts of both old and new fans with another big album. It's overwhelming amounts of success. A lot of bands aren't able to recover from their early work popping off in such a way, and it's typical that they won't produce anything near to the standard again. But Arctic Monkeys have showed that they can do that with AM. So I think I never write them off in terms of doing it again. They're currently being a bit experimental with both Tranquility Base and The Car, but I won't be surprised if in the next 10 years we get another absolute monster of an album to blow us all away once again. I think, to be honest, when Damon Albarn said Arctic Monkeys were the last great guitar band, there was some truth in it. And I don't think specifically in terms of rock and guitar music, we've had an album that was as big as AM since its release. We've had plenty of big albums and plenty of great rock bands, but nothing has quite cemented itself in the same way. For example, I understand we have the 1975 nowadays, but they're not strictly a guitar band. And once again, I'm more aware that there are lots of great rock bands out there since Arctic Monkeys' arrival on the scene, but that's not really the point. It's reflective of the most recent guitar band that is both massively popular, very successful, and produces good music. And it seems to be a holy trinity that only Arctic Monkeys have at this very moment. Looking back, and although I'm not really a big fan of their music, I always thought Catfish and the Bottlemen might be the next big band. I always thought we could potentially see them become the next big thing and overtake Arctic Monkeys' place at the same time. But they couldn't really get over the line the same way AM did, which was a bit of a shame. So I guess after reflecting on AM and looking towards the future, will Arctic Monkeys be the one to produce the next big rock album once again and remain the largest and most successful rock band in terms of recent history? Or will someone new be climbing up the ranks to take their place? Who knows, but I'll look forward to finding out. AM certainly does have its critics, with people who just don't gel with the album. And it does have a following of hipster wannabe humbug fans who say the album is bad in order to try and prove that they're more of an Arctic Monkeys fan than you. I think AM over the past 10 years has held up incredibly well and is an album I regularly revisit alongside a lot of other fans as well. I love this album and I hope it's treated you well over the past decade also, or however long you've been listening to it. Do let me know in the comments your feelings on this album turning a decade old, and if you've heard it since release or if you only heard it in the past year. As always, feel free to like and subscribe if you're new here. And on that note, I think I'll say ta-ra for now, and I'll see you later.